Why is everything so weird with the lights off? By Kiribaku Happiness. The knock on the door jolts Kirishima awake in the middle of the night. He teeters on the fuzzy edges of sleepy consciousness, trying to decide if the unexpected disturbance was really worth getting out of his cozy bed for. He could just pretend to be asleep. Whoever it was would probably leave him if he didn't answer, right? He doesn't have time to consider it as another heavy, open-handed thud echoes from the other side of the room. He groans into his pillow, already feeling the dregs of drowsiness slipping away from him, before he tosses his sheets back with a dramatic, passionate flourish and hauls himself up to his feet. With a hand pressing deep into the tissue of his eye as he suppresses a yawn, he stumbles through the dark of his dorm room towards the door. He flicks the light on, blinking blurrily as it blinds him, before he opens the door and peers out into the hallway to see it was decided that midnight on a school night was the best time to strike up a conversation with him. He can't say he's surprised to see Bakugou Katsuki's scowling face leering in at him, though he is surprised to see that the other boy is still dressed in his school uniform at this hour. And he looks like hell. His hair is messier than usual, and almost up, with some wayward spikes pointing out in awkward directions where they usually laid flat, and lying flat in areas where they usually stuck up. The front of his uniform is unbuttoned 2 extra buttons, exposing more of his pale chest than Kirishima really needs to see. The skin around his eyes looks purple from exhaustion. "Bakugou?" Kirishima grunts out, stifling another yawn that threatens to overtake him as he opens his door a little wider to see the disheveled blonde in front of him. "What's going on?" Bakugou hovers in the doorway. Kirishima can practically see his body pulsing as he balances on the brink of making some monumental decision that only he's aware of. Finally, he leans against Kirishima's doorframe, and his expression changes on a dime. A self-satisfied smirk crawls onto his lips as he juts out his chin and proudly proclaims, with all the humble nature of a bragging toddler, "I drank tonight." He lifts his hand and points an aggressive finger into Kirishima's face, almost jabbing him in the eye, as he finishes his honorable declaration with a firm, "Fucker." Kirishima blinks at him. What? What the hell is he even talking about? It's way too late for this. "You drank? Like, what? Like you made tea?" Bakugou snorts loudly, and the force of it rocks his shoulder against the doorframe as he sways, before he looks steadily at Kirishima again. "You're such a goddamn idiot." He says it like it's an observation he's just now making, like he doesn't call Kirishima an idiot at least twice a day. His tone is partly surprised by this discovery, and partly amused by it. Kirishima frowns and really takes a look at the man in front of him, at the rumpled state of his uniform jacket, and the light blush of heat that settled onto his pale cheeks. He glances over the glossy look in Bakugou's eyes, and the unmistakable waver in his usually confident stance, and then it hits him. Bakugou drank tonight. Bakugou was drunk. Right now. Like, right in front of Kirishima's own 2 eyes. He was torn between lecturing his best bro about engaging in such activities on a school night, sounding a lot more like Ida than he'd like to admit, and racing over to his bed to grab his phone and take a picture to capture the moment, so that he could remind himself in the morning that this wasn't all just some weird fever dream, now sounding a lot more like Kaminari. His classmates were really starting to rub off on him. "Dude, you drank? Like alcohol?" Bakugou clicks his tongue against the roof of his mouth, and jerks his chin up higher than necessary to look down at Kirishima, despite the lack of actual height difference between them, and the smirk that grows on his face is one of full feral victory. "Yep." His lips smack together on the P, and he lifts his finger up again to point it directly into Kirishima's face. That Pikachu-looking motherfucker said I would never hang out with our classmates, but I fucking did it. I sat next to that peppermint monotone fuck all goddamn night, and I didn't explode on him once. He pauses for a second, his chin falling a little, like he's just remembered something distressing and annoying. Then he huffs and scowls hard, lines creasing onto his face. I only exploded on him once. He relents begrudgingly through gritted teeth, as though Kirishima had somehow dragged the information out of him by just existing. Kirishima blinks at him, because, really, what else is he supposed to do right now? He knew that sometimes his classmates would drink. Mina has thrown parties in the common area that Ida had loudly protested to, before becoming flustered when an inebriated Ochiko teasingly toyed with his tie, and got him to promise not to rat them out. Kirishima had even attended some of the parties himself, but Bakugou never hung out with their classmates, especially not to drink or party. Sure, every now and then Kirishima could convince him to stop yelling long enough to sit in the common area and watch a movie with his friends, or he could entice his more competitive side into playing some games, with a well-phrased challenge that always left Bakugou rearing to win. But it usually came with a lot of resistance, and even more cursing and grumbling. Wait, you were drinking with Todoroki? Is he drunk too? Kirishima tries to peer out into the hallway, as though he expects Todoroki to be lingering nearby. He's not, of course, but one could dream. Bakugou pouts at him angrily, his bottom lip jutting out in harsh indignation. You're talking about me right now. Before Kirishima can figure out what question to ask next, because he has a lot of questions, Bakugou's hand is covering his face. His fingertips press into Kirishima's forehead and cheekbones and obscure his vision of the blonde in front of him. He starts dumbly, his senses bombarded by the heavy scent of nitroglycerin that clings to the skin of Bakugou's palms, before Bakugou pushes his hand away, forcing Kirishima to stumble back a step. He takes that opportunity to then push the door open further, and waltzes into the room like he owns the place. You could have just asked to come in. Kirishima chuckles. He can't help but be a little amused. He's never really considered what Bakugou would be like when he was drunk, and he's kinda curious to find out, but also a little apprehensive. This was still Lord Explosion Murder he was dealing with, after all. Bakugou stops in the middle of the room, taking in all the posters on the walls, and eyeing suspiciously at the punching bag, as if he's never seen one before in his life. He sways a little, before he frowns and squints dangerously. Kirishima tenses in preparation for some snarky remark about his inability to decorate, but all that comes out of Bakugou's slurred mouth is, "This isn't my fucking room." Wow. Okay, maybe he's a lot more drunk than Kirishima first thought. Dude, no, this is my room. Kirishima grins, feeling the last bit of sleep starting to slide out of him. He was going to have a hell of a time getting back to sleep now, so he might as well enjoy this for all it was worth. He was sure he'd never get the opportunity to see Bakugou like this again. Where was his phone? Tch! Bakugou slumps down onto the bed anyway, throwing his head up and bringing his hands to rest under his head. It's not an unfamiliar sight. Despite always sneering at Kirishima's muscle clock, which was way unnecessary because that thing was cool, and mocking some of the posters and banners that Kirishima chose to display on his walls, they usually hung out in his room rather than Bakugou's, and the blonde had fallen asleep on his bed more than a handful of times, or wrapped up in Kirishima's camouflage blanket, with his face buried into Kirishima's pillow. This was fairly contained compared to those rare moments. What are you doing, man? Kirishima laughs as he walks over to the side of his bed and looks down at the scruffy pile of baggy clothes that was his best friend. Go to your own room, it's late. Bakugou flips him off without opening his eyes. Fuck off, shithead, I'm thinking. Kirishima sighs and runs a hand over his face. It's hard to argue with Bakugou on a good day, so we can't really imagine what it would be like to try and convince a drunk Bakugou to do something he clearly doesn't want to. It would probably be a nightmare, and Kirishima's not really looking to get an explosion to the head right now. So, instead of arguing, he relents, and settles for pulling up his desk chair to sit down on it, leaning back and putting his feet up on his bed, trying to compact his ever-growing body into the chair comfortably, with very little success. He looks back over at Bakugou, and watches as the blonde chews on the inside of his cheek, and stares daggers up at the ceiling. He's definitely thinking, all right. Kirishima kicks lightly at the mattress. What are you thinking so hard about, dude? Bakugou glances at him out of the corner of his eye, and he pouts angrily again. Pikachu is a peak of shit. Kirishima blinks, momentarily taken off guard. And then he blinks again. Did Bakugou just try to make a pun? Kirishima doesn't think he can hold the laughter in even if he wants to. It comes bursting out of him, and he can feel the tears gathering at his eyes, and the familiar tightening sensation of his abs rolling through his laughs as he doubles over. Oh my god! He tries to breathe in between gasping stutters, and he can practically feel Bakugou vibrating on his bed with unchecked pride. Dude, what the hell? You're such a dork! Fuck you, Bakugou grunts. But there's a lazy smirk pulling at his lips that tells him he doesn't really mean it. He never really does when he's talking to Kirishima. It's nice, like they have their own secret language between them that no one else could ever hope to interpret or be a part of. Seriously, what's up? You can talk to me about anything. Kirishima grins, settling back down into his chair. Bakugou hesitates, which is instantly a red flag that makes Kirishima's smile falter a bit. Bakugou never hesitates. He doesn't have the time. The dude is literally a tornado that runs 1,000 miles a minute every given day, always wound up tight and ready to fucking go. It takes him a total of 2 seconds to make a truly reckless decision, and once he's set his mind to something, he springs into action before anyone can even think about stopping him. But here, lying on Kirishima's bed full of alcohol and giving him the side-eye while he chews on the inside of his cheek, he hesitates. Bakugou, Kirishima starts, trying not to sound too prying or worried. Bakugou hates that more than anything, and it's a surefire way to ensure that he'll never tell Kirishima what's on his mind, if he suspects that Kirishima might think he's showing any sign of weakness. He has to play it cool and nonchalant. What's on your mind, dude? Bakugou looks at him another second longer, and then he's glaring up at the ceiling again, with his brows pulled down into a determined, focused wrinkle. He's made a decision. I can fucking hang out with people too. Kirishima blinks at surprise at this statement. Whatever he thought Bakugou was going to say, this definitely wasn't it. He tries to laugh, even as he feels the tension rising in the room. Of course you can, man. I've been trying to get you to hang out with our classmates since like first year. I'm proud of you, even though you're totally going to regret this in the morning. But that's part of the fun. Bakugou's eyes squint more, and he grinds his teeth together, jaw flexing dangerously. I just don't fucking like to, he continues, as though Kirishima hadn't even spoken. Kirishima nods, still not seeing where Bakugou could be going with this. Does Bakugou even know where he's going with this? I know, and that's fine too. You're allowed to not like it, no matter what Denki says. Bakugou sighs heavily, like Kirishima isn't getting it. And to be fair, Kirishima isn't. He doesn't understand why Bakugou is so troubled by this, like it's a battle that he's been waging inside of himself for a long time, and he's only just now trying to deal with it. Like it's been building up, and now there's no way to ignore it any longer. But you like to hang out with these shitheads, he bites out through gritted teeth, still refusing to look in Kirishima's direction. So I have to learn how to like it too. Kirishima almost laughs at that, Genuinely this time. But he doesn't, because he knows that Bakugou won't handle it well. Sometimes the blonde has a hard time differentiating teasing from making fun of, and Kirishima's not about to do anything that might set him off when he's already starting to look so strained. No, you don't, dude. I mean, I'm flattered that you think you have to, but you really don't. This wasn't the right thing to say, judging by the way Bakugou's whole body tenses up. Yeah, I do, you fucking idiot, Bakugou snaps, and he sits up, albeit a little clumsy, and crosses his legs to glare down into his lap, his fist clenching and unclenching at an alarming rate. Kirishima can smell the nitroglycerin from here, and he can tell Bakugou is getting really worked up. He has to choose his next few words carefully, unless he wants to risk his favorite bedsheets going up in flames. Why do you think that? He asks instead, hoping to get some context as to where this is all coming from. Bakugou seems more receptive when he's drunk, more willing to talk about how he's feeling and what he's thinking than he usually is when he's sober. So Kirishima is half hopeful that maybe this will be easy, and they can smother whatever is bothering him right now, before it has the chance to fester into something unsavory. Bakugou grunts, like he can't believe Kirishima doesn't already know. Like it's so painfully obvious, and Kirishima is purposely missing the point just to make him look foolish. Still, he unclenches his fists and slides his sweaty palms over the thighs of his baggy pants, to wipe away some of the excess nitroglycerin. Pikachu fucking said... Bakugou winces, then glares harder, like he's annoyed that he's let something that Kaminari said affect him so much. Before he barrels on, driven forward only by sheer tenacity and his own stubbornness to not appear weak. He said I don't fucking make an effort to do the shit you want to do or whatever, and then you're gonna get fucking tired of me or some shit and not want to fucking hang out with me anymore. Kirishima doesn't know what to say to that. He's stunned into silence, his mouth hanging open a little. He knows where Kaminari got the idea from, and knowing how he knows makes him feel extremely guilty. He hadn't meant it exactly like that. When he'd been talking to Kaminari a few weeks ago, during one of their video game nights that Bakugou had refused to attend. Again. He'd said something along the lines of wishing that Bakugou would hang out with all of them more, thinking that his explosive, prickly friend might actually have fun if he lets himself relax around them. They've been friends for almost 3 years now. Wasn't that long enough to know that he could trust to be himself around them? Kaminari must have taken Kirishima's apparent disappointment to heart, and made it his mission to inform Bakugou of his selfish ways. Though it seemed like either Kaminari had taken it a step too far, or Bakugou had interpreted it in all the wrong ways for them to end up where they are now. Kirishima sighs and runs another hand over his face. Admitting to Bakugou that he's been talking about him behind his back wasn't going to go over very well, but he knows he has to be honest with him. After nearly 3 years of solid friendship, Kirishima has learned through many trials and errors that directness and honesty is the only way to handle anything when it comes to Bakugou. His best friend hates pussyfooting around the bush, and lies almost as much as he hates looking weak and losing. Besides, Bakugou appears to be genuinely distressed by this information, and it warms Kirishima's chest a bit to know that he values their friendship this much. Enough to put him in an uncomfortable situation that he otherwise wouldn't have even considered taking part in. It was such a manly thing to do. Such a Bakugou thing to do. Kirishima would hug him if he knew Bakugou wouldn't explode his face for doing so. He settles for bumping the blonde's knee with his foot. Look, man, Kirishima starts, running a hand through his tangled red locks. Yeah, I said something to Kaminari about how you never really hang out with anyone but me. Bakugou glares at that, his hand clenching again, and Kirishima hurries on before he can get all up in arms about it. But I never said I was going to stop hanging out with you or anything, or that I even wanted to. It's just, you're always alone, dude. I never see you talking to anyone else or hanging out with them, and I just worry that you're going to regret it after we graduate. I just want you to be happy, you know? This statement disarms Bakugou enough that Kirishima stops worrying about the safety of his blanket. The anger and frustration that was on his face a second ago is gone, replaced by a dumbfounded look of confusion and exasperation that smooths his features and makes his skin look soft, softer than it should. Then he clenches his jaw. Fucker, he says pointedly. It must be his new favorite word tonight. He flip-flops between profanities every other week. And he leans back into Kirishima's pillow again. Why didn't you fucking say anything to me about it? Kirishima's not sure how much he likes open for communication Bakugou. He's a lot smarter and better at arguing compared to when he's all clammed up and refusing to participate. He wants to say something snarky about the fact that Bakugou is probably the last person who should be scolding anyone for not talking about the things he's feeling. But even Kirishima has to admit that once Bakugou has decided to confront something, he would go directly to the source of his problems, no matter how uncomfortable the conversation would be. That's just kind of the guy Bakugou was. Kirishima rubs an awkward hand up and down the back of his neck. I don't know. I guess I was just afraid. I don't know, man. I'm sorry, you're right, I should have. I just don't want to press you into doing anything you don't really want to do. It's what makes you so uniquely you. I wouldn't want you any other way, dude. Bakugou glares at that. Except you do want me some other way, dude. You want me to be all fucking buddy-buddy with that bumbling band of morons that are always parading around you. Kirishima sighs and runs both sets of his fingers through his hair now, tugging gently at his locks in mild frustration. It is so late for them to be having this conversation. And it's over nothing. Of course, the one time Bakugou decides he's ready to openly communicate about the way he feels, and it's over something so incredibly trivial. Kirishima tries to backtrack. I'd only want you to hang out with the others if it's something that you'd want to do. It's not for my sake. I like the way we hang out alone all the time, so that's not what I was trying to say. Bakugou sits up at that, staring at Kirishima hard now. Hard enough to make Kirishima replay whatever he's just said, over in his head to see if there's anything that might have triggered such a prompt reaction from him. I like hanging out alone with you. It's a simple statement, really. One that Kirishima has also just nonchalantly thrown out into the universe as well. But Bakugou says it differently than how Kirishima's just said it. He's standing on his feet now, swaying a little bit more, and Kirishima lets his own feet slide off the mattress to sit up straighter in his chair. He can't interpret the look that's on Bakugou's face right now, which is a little unsettling. Usually he's pretty fluent in the what do Bakugou's facial expressions mean department. But this time he's stumped. He blinks. That's good, man. Look, nothing has to change, okay? Don't let whatever Denki said get to you. I didn't mean it like that, and he probably didn't mean it like that either. Bakugou scowls. You saying I can't fucking follow Pikachu's dumbfuck logic? Wow. Okay, they're really spiraling off topic now. Bakugou looks pissed, and Kirishima's pretty sure his brain has stopped working since it's now past. Holy shit, 1 o'clock in the morning. He can barely follow Bakugou's angry train of thought on a good day. This conversation needs to end, like right now. Alright, dude. Kirishima stands as well, holding his hands up in mock surrender. We'll put a pause on this, okay? Bakugou wrinkles his nose. The fuck? We'll stop this conversation here, and maybe tomorrow when you aren't drunk and I'm not so tired, we can talk about it again, okay? I just don't think right now is the time. He fully expects a fight. Bakugou is always fighting, and now he's drunk and pissed off, so really, Kirishima was expecting more than just a fight. So when Bakugou's shoulders only slump in obvious defeat, and another angry pout juts his bottom lip out, He doesn't really know how to properly react to that. Fucker, Bakugou grumbles. And yeah, it's definitely his favorite word of the night, before he sits back down hard onto Kirishima's bed. Don't wanna fucking go, he mumbles, sounding like a child as he kicks one of the legs of the chair Kirishima had just been sitting in. You don't want to go to sleep? Aren't you tired? You looked wrecked, dude. No offense. Bakugou looks up at him through a fringe of wild blonde hair and thick lashes, and really, he has no business looking so innocent and cute right now, even as his cheeks puff up in obvious annoyance. No, fucker. Kirishima's eyebrows pull together. No? No what? No, you aren't tired? Bakugou sighs in exasperation, throwing his hands up in the air. He's getting frustrated again. Kirishima can see it. But it's not directed at him, judging by the way Bakugou is looking at anything else in the room but him, and plucking at the front of his wrinkled uniform with restless fingers. I want to hang out with you. He grumbles out barely audible words. Oh, that's surprisingly sweet. Kirishima blinks. Drunk Bakugou is very dangerous, he's realizing quite suddenly. But not in the way he's normally dangerous, all loud threats and ticking explosions ready to go off at a moment's notice. He's dangerous in a way that his tongue is loose, like he's been slipped some truth-telling serum, and he says whatever he's thinking without regard. Kirishima worries briefly about how angry he'll be tomorrow about showing such weakness in front of him, if he even remembers any of it. We can hang out tomorrow, dude, Kirishima promises. Maybe after class we can go to the arcade or something. Or we can go see a movie. But right now, we have to go to sleep. You're gonna be exhausted. You might not even have the energy to hang out after hero training, honestly. Bakugou chews on the inside of his cheek and considers this. Kirishima can see the gears turning in his head as he processes this information at an 87 decrease in his usual processing speed. Finally, he straightens out his back and glares at him, lips pursed together in another indignant line. I'll have the fucking energy if we stay in the dorms. It's a compromise. Kirishima should be proud, really. Bakugou doesn't make compromises. Kirishima sighs and gestures around vaguely with one hand. Sure. Okay, we'll hang out here and watch a movie or something. Now come on, let's go. Bakugou huffs angrily. He's pouting again, before he forcefully pushes himself up to his feet. He sways violently, hands reaching for something to hold, and Kirishima steps forward instinctively, letting him grab at his shoulder momentarily to steady himself. He expects Bakugou to rear back, or shove him away like he normally would, yelling about how he doesn't need any fucking help. But he doesn't. Instead, he takes Kirishima off guard, yet again, and slides the hand on his shoulder across his back, and hooks his arm around Kirishima's neck, leaning against him for more support than he probably needs. Kirishima's stunned into stillness for a moment, his poor, tired brain struggling to keep up. Bakugou has always been a complex person to be around, to be friends with. He doesn't really say anything exactly how he means it. It's always hidden behind secret phrases or certain tones that need decoding. And he doesn't really like being touched, except for the occasional arm slung over the shoulder, or enthusiastic fist bump following a well-fought victory. And he definitely doesn't initiate any kind of contact like that. It's taken Kirishima a while to really perfect the language that he and Bakugou have created between them. But drunk Bakugou seems more than willing to throw all of that hard-earned knowledge out the window, and send Kirishima curveball after curveball that he's miserably unequipped to handle right now. You good? He asks, mostly to fill the silence that's fallen in between them, and partly to cover up the fact that his heart is now racing in his ears, and he's sure Bakugou must be able to hear it, considering how close he is all of a sudden. Kirishima can feel his breath on the side of his face and neck, and it's distracting in all the wrong ways. Bakugou grunts and presses his fingertips into his own hairline, grumbling under his breath and squeezing his eyes shut. Feel like shit. Sorry, man.
Kirishima hesitates, before he scolds himself for doing so, because this is Bakugou, his best bro, don't tell Kaminari, and pats him gently on the back. Drinking will do that to you, unfortunately. It's fucking stupid. Bakugou sneers into his palm. You ready? It's not very far to your room. You'll be in bed in no time. Never in Kirishima's wildest dreams did he think he'd be mother-henning a drunk Bakugou. Then again, tonight was full of surprises. He reaches a hand up and clasps gentle fingers around the wrist that Bakugou is dangling over his shoulder, to secure him before he starts forward. After a moment of agitated grumblings, Bakugou follows. They make it to Bakugou's bedside with minimal damage, besides the shoulder that Bakugou had knocked painfully into his doorframe on his way into his room. They stop beside the already made bed, and Kirishima reaches down to peel the covers back. Bakugou leans against him more, arm tightening around his neck, and Kirishima is just about to untangle him and help him lay down, when Bakugou suddenly hunches forward and vomits right onto his bed. Kirishima can feel his face paling at an alarming rate, and he grabs onto Bakugou in a death grip, trying to keep his head from spinning. He's never survived watching someone else puke without puking himself, and Bakugou is so close, and the smell is so bad. Shit, dude. Kirishima manages to squeak out, eyes glued to the ceiling to avoid looking down at the mess that now sits in front of him. He closes his eyes and tries not to listen, even though it's next to impossible, as Bakugou throws up again. The arm around his neck is tight, and Bakugou is fisting sweaty fingers into the front of his shirt, so hard that his knuckles are popping. Kirishima closes his eyes and keeps his head back, praying that he can control himself just this once. Fuck. Bakugou grunts next to him, and leans his cheek into the bony curve of Kirishima's shoulder. He's panting, and his whole body is shaking from the effort of holding himself up. Kirishima wraps his arm tighter around his waist, and bears the brute of his rapidly limping weight against his hip. Feel better now. Bakugou grumbles into his shirt. Kirishima sighs loudly through his nose and tries to count to 10. 1. Okay, Bakugou was way too drunk to be left on his own. 2. Even if he wasn't way too drunk to be left on his own, he's now made a complete and absolute mess of his bed, and there's no way he can sleep there tonight. 3. If there's no way he can sleep in his own room tonight, then he's gonna have to sleep in Kirishima's room. 4. If he sleeps in Kirishima's room, he's gonna have to admit to needing help. 5. If he wakes up tomorrow morning and realizes how much help he actually needed tonight, he's gonna be furious. 6. If he wakes up furious in Kirishima's room, then he's gonna take it out on Kirishima. 7. If he tries to take it out on Kirishima, after Kirishima spent all fucking night trying to help him, Kirishima might take his frustration out on Bakugou. 8. If he takes his frustration out on Bakugou, then Bakugou's gonna get defensive. 9. If Bakugou gets defensive, he might not speak to Kirishima for several days. 10. If he doesn't speak to Kirishima for several days, then what was even the point of trying to help him in the first place? Sorry. Bakugou's whispered voice breaks Kirishima's concentration. He slumps harder into Kirishima's side, pressing his cheek further into his shoulder, his head lolling down so Kirishima can't see his face. I've been fucking shitty tonight. This is new. Another curveball that he was not ready for. Bakugou very rarely ever apologized for his behavior. Kirishima takes a second to collect himself, to reason with himself that Bakugou has grown a lot since they first became friends, and their shared language has subtly changed as all relationships tend to, especially in the past year. Maybe Bakugou won't flip out in the morning. Maybe he'll be embarrassed and annoyed and dying from the worst hangover he'll probably ever experience in his life. But maybe he won't take it out on Kirishima like he would have in their first year. They're nearly adults now. They're almost pro-heroes. Even Bakugou must realize that. Besides, he was Kirishima's best friend, And Kirishima was a good friend, damn it. And good friends don't leave their best bros to deal with this kind of shit on their own. He tightens his grip on Bakugou and shoulders more of the boy's increasingly deadpanning weight. It's okay, man. No worries, alright? You'll just stay in my room tonight. Bakugou grunts and his head sways as he rolls his cheek along Kirishima's shoulder. We'll hang out. Kirishima can't push down the smile that breaks across his lips, or hold back the laugh of surprise that bubbles out of him at Bakugou's words. Yeah, we'll hang out, just like you wanted. Was this your plan all along? Just waiting to puke all over your own bed so we could hang out some more? You really know how to make a dude feel special, Baku bro. He can't see his face, but Kirishima feels Bakugou smirk and shudder out a weak snort, and it gives him enough rejuvenated vigor to make the short trek back to his room. He sits Bakugou down in his chair, and Bakugou finally releases the tight hold from around his neck. He pushes the table out from the center of his room, pressing it flush along the wall next to his desk, before he turns and grabs his blanket and his only pillow, and sets to work laying out a makeshift bed for Bakugou on the floor. If he had known this was going to happen, he would have brought his sleeping bag back to campus after the last camping trip together. Bakugou must be thinking along the same lines as he is, because he scowls harshly at the pile on the floor. I don't want to sleep there, he grunts, unsatisfied. Kirishima huffs out a laugh and rolls his eyes. Well, sorry, I wasn't expecting to have guests tonight. Come on. He stands to his feet and reaches a hand out for Bakugou to take, but the blonde merely glares at it stubbornly. I have to brush my teeth, he says suddenly. I just puked, my mouth tastes nasty as fuck. Kirishima sighs loudly and puts his hands on his hips. This is really becoming a whole thing with him, isn't it? He supposes he should have seen this coming. Nothing about Bakugou has ever been simple. With all the thin patience of a mother whose child keeps asking for more things just to prolong bedtime, Kirishima hurries back over to Bakugou's bathroom to retrieve his toothbrush. When he steps back into his room, he sees that Bakugou has gotten to his feet on his own, and that he's managed to remove the jacket of his uniform and drape it messily on the top of Kirishima's desk, all over his notebooks and laptop. He must be starting to sober up. His eyes don't look as glassy, and his stance isn't as unsteady. Still, he doesn't look great, and Kirishima hovers in the doorway of his bathroom and watches the blonde as he brushes his teeth. Which he doesn't appreciate, of course. Think I'm gonna choke on my tongue or something? Bakugou bites out sharply, but it's muted as his lips stained with toothpaste wrapped tightly around his toothbrush, in what must be some poor adaptation of his signature scowl. He looks decidedly less threatening like this, and Kirishima only smiles tiredly at him. Just let me take care of you, man. He huffs out, around an amused laugh that quickly dissolves into a loud yawn. Bakugou snorts, spraying toothpaste onto the mirror, which he clumsily wipes away with the wrinkled sleeve of his button-down, before he leans forward and spits. Once he's gone through the apparently laborious and not-so-delicate task of brushing his teeth so aggressively that the germs just decide on their own to wither away and die, Kirishima follows him back out into the makeshift bed. Bakugou eyes the blankets on the floor with obvious distaste. Kirishima rolls his eyes and flicks off his light, plunging them into semi-darkness, before he walks over to his now barren bed and face plants onto it. He's so very tired. Kirishima can hear shuffling happening somewhere beside him, and he rolls his head to the side to watch as Bakugou struggles with the front of his uniform. Once he's decided that his fingers aren't working properly enough to unbutton it, he tries to pull the offensive fabric off over his head, immediately lodging the material around his broad shoulders and getting stuck. Kirishima grins openly in the dark. Such a dork. Before he labors to sit back up on his bed. Oh my god. Come here, dude. He gets out through a stream of light chuckling. Bakugou's headless figure whips around to look at his direction, and Kirishima knows he's glaring at him somewhere in there, which only makes him crack up more. Shut the fuck up! I can do it! Bakugou shouts as he struggles more sporadically to yank the shirt off. You're such a mess. Kirishima grins before he reaches out and grabs at the fabric, fluttering near his exposed stomach, and giving it a persistent little tug. Please let me help you. This is just getting hard to watch, man. Bakugou goes still, and for a moment, Kirishima wonders if he'll set off an explosion and wake up the whole building. But no, he just sighs loudly and lets Kirishima know that he isn't happy about this, before he finally steps over to stand in front of him. Kirishima works at tugging the tangled shirt back down until Bakugou's head pokes through again, red-faced and refusing to make eye contact. His pale skin and light hair glow in the beams of the moonlight, falling in through the balcony windows. Kirishima's smile softens at the sight. Bakugou always looked lighter at night, grumpy and not as menacing. Cute, even. Before his mind can really wander away with that train of thought, Kirishima starts unbuttoning the rest of his shirt. He tries hard not to skim any of the bare skin underneath, because in the low lighting of his bedroom, the action suddenly feels far too intimate. He's just about near the end, with 3 buttons left to go, when the feeling of fingers cutting through his hair at the top of his bent head makes him stop. Shitty hair, Bakugou grumbles, calloused fingers rubbing and tugging at the red locks with little regard to how rough he's being. It's down. Kirishima tries to laugh, eyes bulging, but it comes out airy and weird. He tries hard to focus on finishing his task as quickly as possible. Bakugou needs to go to sleep. He's totally out of his mind right now. He's delirious. I'm not going to sleep with it all spiked up, he says, casually in an attempt to fill the silence that's now way too loud in his eardrums. Bakugou hums and lifts his other hand, delving more fingers into Kirishima's hand like they've done this before. As if it isn't weird at all. It's less shitty this way, he mumbles. Maybe more so to himself than to Kirishima. But Kirishima still hears him. He clears his throat and tries to laugh again, pulling open at the last button and finally looking up at Bakugou again. The moment stills the blonde searching fingers. Is that a compliment? I didn't know you were capable of those. He grins cartoonishly enough to let Bakugou know he's just teasing him. Bakugou scowls, his eyes squinting suspiciously, before he pulls his hands out of his hair and moves one of them to cover Kirishima's face again instead. He pushes, and Kirishima thuds back onto his bed, heart racing a little at the action as his mind skyrockets in every direction that it most definitely shouldn't. Bakugou scoffs and moves away from the side of the bed, letting his shirt slide off his shoulders and tumble down his toned back onto the ground. He sinks into the pile of blankets on the floor without any further complaint. Kirishima stares up at the ceiling, trying to regulate his breathing. Which is so weird. Why is he being so weird right now? Why does this feel so weird? It's not like they haven't spent the night in each other's dorm rooms before. Back in first year, after the whole Kamino incident thing, Kirishima had spent plenty of nights in Bakugou's room. He'd listen to him vent about his nightmares and inevitably fall asleep inside his sleeping bag, because Bakugou hadn't wanted him to leave, despite never actually admitting such a fact out loud. And they've gone camping together, multiple times. They've slept in the same tent, inches apart from each other, separated only by their sleeping bags. Hell, they even shared a sleeping bag once before, and it was no big deal then. He must be tired. He should really go to sleep. He takes a final breath before he rotates himself to lay face down horizontally on top of his bed again, trying hard to empty his thoughts. Which was such a foreign concept to him, so maybe that's why he was so bad at it. He'd never had to fight this hard to fall asleep before, especially not when he was already feeling so drowsy. Classes were gonna suck tomorrow. Kirishima. Bakugou kicks his leg out somewhere in the dark below, rustling the sheets around him with jerky movements. What's up, man? Kirishima mumbles tiredly into his mattress, not opening his eyes. Why isn't Bakugou asleep yet? He's kept a religious bedtime of 8:30 p.m. since they've known each other. Why wasn't he exhausted? Kirishima was exhausted. I'm not fucking comfortable, Bakugou whines. Kirishima has to laugh at that, ignoring the goosebumps rising on his skin from his lack of usual blankets. He presses himself deeper into his mattress, seeking warmth. Your bed is a mess, dude. This is the best you're gonna get. Just go to sleep. Silence engulfs them for another minute, and Kirishima is half convinced that Bakugou has finally drifted off, until... Kirishima! He sighs loudly. This night might actually be the death of him. He should have known that Bakugou would play some sort of role in his demise. What's up? He grumbles into his mattress, trying to stay patient. Bakugou is drunk, he has to remind himself, and drunk people aren't exactly known for being cooperative. Bakugou shuffles around incessantly, growing more agitated the longer it takes for him to find a spot to settle down in. I'm not fucking comfortable, he says again, louder and firmer this time, as if that will change anything. I don't know what you want me to do about it, dude. You've literally got all my blankets. Just try to sleep, okay? We have class in the morning. Kirishima pleads. Tch. Bakugou goes quiet again. Kirishima doesn't know if he's finally content, or if he's silently seething. But he finds that he doesn't really care right now. He'll deal with the consequences in the morning if he really has to. For now, he just wants to sleep. He rolls onto his side, turning his back to the blonde, and tries to forget that he's there so he can fall asleep. He thinks about math homework, and then he tries counting sheep. But then, all he can do is think about that time Kaminari showed him how ridiculously big sheep got when they didn't get regularly trimmed, and... is Bakugou kicking around again? Bakugou, there is literally nothing. The bed dips beside him, and whatever other words that were planning on coming out of his mouth are immediately silenced. Oh no. This is new. This is a big new. They didn't share beds. It was an unspoken rule between them. At this point, Kirishima's not sure who came up with it. Probably Bakugou, considering his intolerance for human contact. But it was an unspoken rule between them nonetheless. Even when they shared that sleeping bag that one time, Bakugou had been adamant for Kirishima to know that this would only be a one-time thing, never to happen again, never to be repeated. He didn't like people in his space, and he didn't like sharing a bed. He made that very clear. And yet, here he was, being a hypocrite, sliding down into Kirishima's bed like he's done this before, like it's not weird, and grumbling quietly to himself as he tosses and shakes the bed sheets out until they somewhat cover them both, though they're still a bit tangled and uneven, and Kirishima's feet are still sticking out, and... oh god. Bakugou is shirtless. Bakugou is drunk, and he is shirtless, and he's in Kirishima's bed in the middle of the night. Oh no. Kirishima should do something. He should say something, right? What kind of friend would he be if he didn't say anything? If he didn't double, triple, quadruple check that Bakugou knew what he was doing? What if he was half asleep right now and he thought he was back in his own dorm, and he thought Kirishima's bed was his own? What if he didn't really understand what he was doing by wiggling deeper under the blankets, closer to Kirishima's ramrod stiff back? What if... oh, that's an arm. That's Bakugou's arm. It's around his waist now, and yanking him closer with all the gentleness of a feral cat, dragging its prey back into its den. And that's Bakugou's breath on the back of his neck, and... he should say something. He has to. He's a good friend, damn it. But his mouth isn't working. It really doesn't want to move. And he can feel his heart thundering away inside his chest as Bakugou's strong arms tighten its already vice-like hold on him. What is he doing? Is he really okay with this? He knows Bakugou. Knows him better than probably anyone else at that school. Except maybe Midoriya. And he knows for a fact that Bakugou doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. He's stubborn and steadfast, and if anyone tries to give him shit for not doing something that he should be doing, he'll just flip them off and continue doing whatever the fuck he wants. So, he must want to do this then, right? That thought sends Kirishima's mind reeling in a very different direction, and he's suddenly made painfully aware of the way Bakugou's bare chest brushes against his back with every breath he takes. Bakugou has never been overly affectionate. It just wasn't his style. Sometimes he'd tug on Kirishima's hair, if Kirishima made a particularly good joke, and Bakugou doesn't want to admit how funny he thought it was. Sometimes he'd knock their shoulders together, when Kirishima was teasing him and his face was all red, but he wasn't angry, because he was very rarely ever angry at Kirishima. So he'd bump their shoulders together, and roll his eyes, and call him a loser, or lame, or something like that. Bakugou wasn't an overly affectionate guy, and Kirishima really liked that about him. It made the moments when he was affectionate just that more special. It made the little smirks of amusement that he sent Kirishima over their homework that much more endearing. It made the little knowing looks that they shared during class when someone said something stupid or outlandish, in a way that only students of their class could, feel that much more intimate. A secret language between them, filled with little touches that were passed off as accidents, and barely contained smiles, and manly aggressive shoves, and stifled bellowing laughter behind a hand slapped over a mouth. Bakugou shifts against him, pressing harder into his back, his arms tightening around Kirishima's waist, and, oh, he's definitely doing this on purpose. Kirishima has to say something. Bakugou. His voice sounds weird in his own ears. It's breathless and quiet and uncertain. Bakugou freezes against him. Kirishima can feel his chest rising and falling, pressed firmly against his back, and he can feel the blonde's forehead digging into his shoulder blade. His rampant heartbeats count out the sounds of silence that follow. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fight! Bakugou presses into him again, but this time it's not just with his chest. His hips move too, and Kirishima's shocked into complete, pathetic immobility, as he feels the hard press of Bakugou's crotch straining through his slacks as it rubs against his hip. His face explodes into a fiery blush, and he tries not to swallow too quickly, or weirdly, or whatever. He tries so hard to act normal, but this is not normal, and he doesn't know what to do with this. He wants to be a good friend. Bakugou wouldn't be doing this right now if he wasn't drunk, and Kirishima doesn't want him to be doing anything that he wouldn't normally do. But he also doesn't really want Bakugou to stop. And that thought is just so humiliating that it sends another hot flush up his neck and into his cheeks as Bakugou presses into him again. A slight upward tilt in his hips, a slight grind in his movements. Bakugou. Kirishima tries again. This time, his hands come up, and he touches gingerly at Bakugou's exposed hip bone, stalling his movements more firmly. What are you doing, man? He breathes out through shocked lips. It doesn't even feel like he's the one that's talking. This is like some weird out-of-body experience, and he's just watching from the sidelines. Bakugou is frozen behind him again. Kirishima can feel the small bit of moisture on his shoulder blade, from where Bakugou's lips just barely graze against his t-shirt. The air is thick between them with suspense, and Kirishima digs his thumb into Bakugou's hip, hoping to spur some kind of reaction out of him. Which he does, but it's not the kind of reaction he was looking for. Bakugou's hips move forward again, tilting just a little, and grinding just a bit. It feels like a question, a silent search for permission. Kirishima tries to keep his head clear and tries not to focus on the way his own shorts suddenly feel tighter. No, this is wrong. Bakugou is drunk. He's so drunk. He's delirious. And Kirishima is tired. So very tired. He doesn't want to ruin their friendship like this. Because this is definitely the kind of thing that would ruin their friendship, right? He can't see how they could do something like this. and then go on as if nothing happened. This is definitely crossing some thinly veiled line between them, isn't it? Do they even have any lines between them? Or are they all made up in Kirishima's head? Bakugou, Kirishima says, a little stronger even as his voice cracks. He doesn't have time to be embarrassed about it. Stop. Bakugou stops. His arm tightens around Kirishima's waist again, and he sighs heavily against his shoulder. Kirishima can feel his tense shoulders deflate a little. Why? His rough, grating voice is just above a whisper, and it sends an involuntary shiver down Kirishima's spine. Because he pauses. Shit. Because their friendship is a thing that they have, and he doesn't want to ruin it. Because of lines or something. Because, fuck, this isn't good. Why can't he say all the things that are swirling around in his head right now? Why can't he force them out like the good friend he is? Why are the words getting lodged in his throat? Like he doesn't want to say them. Because, Bakugou supplies. His voice is low and gravelly. The hand resting lazily on the mattress by Kirishima's stomach starts to move. And Kirishima knows where he's headed even before he's headed there. Why? Kirishima grabs his wrist with shaky fingers, before he can skim the growing bulge at the front of his shorts. No, he doesn't want this. Okay, fucking fine. Maybe he does want this. Maybe he wants this so bad that he's almost considering ruining 3 years of hard-fought friendship just to have it. Maybe he's wanted this for so long that he's almost forgotten what it was like to have any hope left in his chest that one day he might actually be able to have it. Maybe he's been pining after Bakugou Katsuki since they became friends. Maybe he's been pining after him since before that. He doesn't fucking know. But he knows he doesn't want this. He doesn't want a drunk hookup at 2 a.m. on a school night, when they both have to get up tomorrow and maneuver around each other like they hadn't just ruined 3 years of a hard-fought friendship in one night. He doesn't want Bakugou to regret it and then withdraw from him, and he definitely doesn't want the guilt that would no doubt eat him alive if Bakugou did regret it in the morning, and Kirishima had made sure it was really what he wanted to do in the first place. Kirishima was a good fucking friend. Damn it. Because you're drunk. Kirishima finally pushes out in a heavy breath that makes his lungs feel like they're collapsing in on themselves. His fingers grip harder at Bakugou's limp wrist. Because you don't really want to do this. Fuck you. Bakugou grumbles immediately into his shoulder. Like he knew what Kirishima was going to say before he's even decided that he was going to say it. Who the fuck says I don't? Kirishima sighs at that and closes his eyes. Bakugou says it so confidently. Kirishima wants to believe him. He really does. He feels so stupid for being on the verge of crying right now. I don't want this, he says quietly. Not like this. Bakugou is quiet again. He's fallen incredibly still. His entire body is tensed up, and Kirishima waits for the explosion that he's sure to come. He doesn't know why he keeps thinking that Bakugou will explode. Maybe it's not fair, but his chest feels tight, and he squeezes his eyes shut and he waits for it anyway, because he doesn't really know what else to do with himself. Shit, Bakugou finally whispers. He wriggles his wrist out of Kirishima's fingers, aggressively shaking him off when Kirishima doesn't let him go immediately. Before his arm is sliding back around his waist, strong and flexing as he grips him tightly again. Sorry, he mumbles into Kirishima's back. Another fucking curveball. He just can't catch a break from drunk Bakugou. Kirishima blinks his eyes open, and something like relief crashes over him. He lets out a long breath and nibbles on his bottom lip. He feels like he should say more. They can't really leave it like this. Bakugou will be so put out tomorrow. He'll probably feel uncomfortable and embarrassed, and he'll go on thinking that Kirishima doesn't want anything more than a platonic relationship with him. And he really can't leave it like this. Not when the door has already been cracked open on this long-awaited topic. He takes another breath to steady himself, before he shifts in bed, mentally cursing when Bakugou withdraws his arm away from him and tucks it underneath himself, until Kirishima is turned around to look at him. He can barely make out Bakugou's face in the moonlight. His head is half buried into Kirishima's pillow, which he must have brought up from the floor along with the blankets, and his jaw is clenched tight. Kirishima catches eyes with one barely opened slit of red. Bakugou is grinding his teeth together and biting at the inside of his mouth. Kirishima can tell by the way his jaw flexes and moves. "Don't be sorry," Kirishima says. He doesn't want Bakugou to be sorry. He doesn't want him to regret it. Bakugou huffs and digs his face deeper into the pillow, the barely open slit of red disappearing from sight. "Fucking hate drinking," Bakugou grumbles into the pillow. "Makes me do stupid shit without fucking thinking." Kirishima chuckles at that. His bed is so small, there's barely enough space for both of them to be lying on it. Bakugou's covered knees are tantalizing next to Kirishima's, and he really has to fight with himself not to tangle their legs together and steal all of his warmth away. "Everyone does stupid shit when they're drunk," Kirishima whispers. He doesn't want to talk too loudly, not when they're so close together, not when this is all so new. Bakugou doesn't answer. His face is buried so far into the pillow that Kirishima wonders how he can still breathe in there. He leans forward, nudging a little bit closer, knocking one of his knees into Bakugou's thigh, and forcing that blazing red slit to appear once more, as Bakugou glances out to look at him. His face is so close now, and Kirishima can see the light blush dusting across Bakugou's cheeks, even in the low light. They stare at each other. Kirishima thinks he should probably be saying something, but he doesn't really know what to say. His brain feels groggy, and he's really fighting off the temptation to fall asleep, especially with Bakugou's warmth radiating beside him. He bites his lip, ignoring the subtle flutter of Bakugou's eyelashes, as he refuses to allow himself to look down at them, before he reaches out with hesitant fingers to touch Bakugou's wrist again. Bakugou stiffens at the sudden contact. That red slit eyes Kirishima curiously, while his tongue pokes out at the inside of his cheek. Kirishima doesn't have time to second-guess himself anymore. The damage has literally already been done when Bakugou thrusts his hard dick against his back, and he gives Bakugou's wrist a little tug. Bakugou hesitates, again, and Kirishima tries to steady his racing heart when he realizes that he's the one making Bakugou Katsuki hesitate. Kirishima tugs his wrist again, and this time, Bakugou's muscles relax enough to allow Kirishima to pull his arm back across his waist. When Bakugou realizes what it is that Kirishima is trying to make him do, he rolls over onto his side, 2 red slits looking at him now instead of 1, and he wraps his arm forcefully around Kirishima's waist, pulling him flush against his chest in one smooth, swift motion. They swallow hard at the same time, before they fall motionless again. From this close, Kirishima can feel Bakugou's breath fanning across his face. He can even smell the hint of toothpaste that the blonde borrowed from his bathroom, and Kirishima has to wrestle with himself to not imagine the light taste of spearmint that's probably clinging to his lips and tongue. His body rages at this new form of contact between them. Sure, he's shared a bed before. With lots of people, actually. He's fallen asleep on the couch smushed between Sarah and Denki more times than he can count on his one hand. He's cuddled Mina until they've both fallen asleep, listening to her drone on about random gossip. He's even gotten Todoroki to lower his head down onto his shoulder, once on the bus after a particularly grueling day of intense hero training. Bakugou had not liked that. Kirishima was used to people leaning on him, or throwing an arm over his shoulder, or hugging him tightly around the waist, or leaning their heads against his shoulder. He was used to the physical contact of it all. But he's never been touched like this by Bakugou before. And what he's not used to is the mental contact that comes with it. Bakugou isn't shy.
His red eyes stare directly into Kirishima's, and Kirishima has to force himself not to look away, because he's supposed to be unwavering and unbreakable. Bakugou knows that he is. Maybe that's why he doesn't try to break eye contact. Maybe he knows that Kirishima can handle it, can handle him, in all his intense, heady, uncensored, feral glory. Kirishima feels strong just thinking about it. He feels invincible with Bakugou's gaze on him. He feels unstoppable. "You're amazing," he whispers, before he can stop himself. Bakugou stops biting on the inside of his cheek and snorts at that, maybe taken a little off guard. He rolls his eyes and finally breaks eye contact. "You're an idiot." Kirishima smiles. "I mean it." Bakugou shifts uncomfortably, and Kirishima is reminded, again, that he is the one making Bakugou feel like this. It's because of him that Bakugou is squirming when he's usually so solid. It's because of him that Bakugou is fighting not to pull him even closer, arms flexing and relaxing and flexing, when he's usually so content with the distance they've built between them. An unwavering, unbreakable distance. A prominent line that cannot be crossed. But why not? Kirishima blinks in surprise at his own question. Bakugou had asked him why they couldn't do this. And really, why couldn't they ignore that line between them? Why couldn't they cross into that unknown territory, hearts beating and fingers itching to reach out, but not touching unless touched first? Kirishima hadn't really had an answer. Because something about friendship and something about stability and something about lines. Kirishima's chest aches. Why not? Why couldn't they? Why shouldn't they? Bakugou's hand, the one hanging somewhere out of sight and out of mind, flutters around Kirishima's lower back then. Kirishima's vaguely aware of the way his fingers touch at the hem of his shirt, pressing lightly into the curve of his spine. His heart is thundering away in his chest, suddenly ignoring all the horrible what-ifs, and instead completely submerged in the endlessly tantalizing why nots. "Bakugou," he whispers, and it sounds different than how he's said it before. Different than how he's ever said it. Bakugou's fingers stall on his back, and his eyes flash up to meet Kirishima's again. The other hand that's been squished between them shifts and slides down, touching two curious fingertips against the exposed skin of Kirishima's stomach, from where his shirt is ridden up. The contact burns, and Kirishima leans his forehead down to brush against Bakugou's. "I'm not doing nothing," Bakugou says, which is so insatiably hilarious, because he's already doing so much that Kirishima can't keep up with. "I just want to touch." The confession does more for Kirishima than he can ever honorably admit to without losing any of his dignity. He wants Bakugou to touch. He wants it so badly. He's surprised he's ever forgotten how much he so desperately wants it. Is this really okay? Why wouldn't it be? Should they really be doing this? Why shouldn't they? What about the lines? What lines? What about their friendship? What about it? What if they regret it? And why would they? And what if they don't like it? Bakugou's fingers brush lazily at Kirishima's stomach, forcing his abs to contract against the feather-light touches, before he trails his hand slowly upwards, diving further under the folds of his t-shirt. How could he not like it? "Don't hate me," Kirishima whispers into the dark. "Please." "Never," Bakugou whispers back. His hand presses flat against Kirishima's back at the same time that his other hand presses flat against his stomach, and he pulls Kirishima into him. Bakugou's bare chest brushes against his shirt, and their hips knock together, knees and thighs overlapping to accommodate for the space on Kirishima's small bed that now feels unnecessarily big. Kirishima barely has the time to consider if he's really been this much of a shit friend all along, that he can't even control himself until his best friend isn't drunk anymore, before Bakugou's hot mouth is on his lips. It's clumsy and a little off-center, and Kirishima's hands fumble to get out of the sheets before he grabs Bakugou's face and presses harder into him. Bakugou is on fire. The hand under his shirt sears hot against Kirishima's abdomen, with built-up explosions and a slick collection of sweat, and Kirishima thinks he should probably be more nervous about being blown up. But he isn't. It just makes his heart beat even faster. It just makes Bakugou feel even more real and solid and manly. It just makes Kirishima want more. He swipes his tongue along Bakugou's lips, and his mouth falls open without any hesitation. They fight against each other for access. Their tongues dip and sweep and push for the upper hand. But Bakugou is stubborn, and Kirishima is desperate, and neither of them gives in. Bakugou's hands drop and drag sweat-stained marks down to grip tightly at Kirishima's hips, and he yanks at them, pulling them impossibly closer together, and angling him so he's rolled onto his back. Bakugou pushes him forward, never pausing in his fight for dominance over Kirishima's mouth, and he leans over him, pressing a thigh between quivering legs and satiating his internal desire to be in control of this situation that is rapidly spiraling out of control. Kirishima quivers under his demanding touch and brings his arms up to wrap tightly around Bakugou's neck, knocking him down against him and stealing back the small semblance of control that Bakugou had tried to secure. Bakugou grunts at the shift in dynamic, but he isn't deterred. If anything, it only encourages him as he peels his mouth away from Kirishima's. He smirks victoriously at the little whimper of impatience that slips out of Kirishima's throat that he's powerless to try and choke down. They breathe against each other, panting for breath in the dark as the muscle clock on Kirishima's wall edges into 3 in the morning. I don't want to not be friends anymore, Kirishima can't help but say, as he gasps quietly for air. His body is tingling where Bakugou's hands have touched, and screaming where his body is still pressed down into him. He's all jagged muscle and sharp angles and sweaty hands, and Kirishima has to stop himself from reaching out and stealing more. Then don't stop being my fucking friend, Bakugou replies easily. His mouth brushes parted lips against Kirishima's jaw as he tapers little experimental kisses down his throat. I don't think friends do this, dude. Kirishima doesn't try and stop the little bubbling laugh of uncertainty and excitement that comes out from him. Stop fucking calling me dude. Bakugou continues to talk as though he isn't blazing a burning fire into Kirishima's veins, with every soft kiss and gentle poking of the tip of his tongue. Is this really what you want? Kirishima forces the question out, already afraid of the answer. His fingers grip tightly at the back of Bakugou's neck and into the soft spikes of his hair. Is this what you want? Bakugou fires back. Kirishima tenses as Bakugou makes the bold move of pressing his tongue flat against his collarbone and dragging it up the side of his neck towards the back of his ear. The noise that escapes him is embarrassing enough to paint his cheeks and chest red. I want whatever you want, he murmurs out shakily. His thighs press tightly against either side of the one Bakugou's lodged into his crotch, and he tries not to rut or strain in any sort of unhinged or truly irreversible fashion. Such a coward. Bakugou nips at his earlobe. I'm not a coward, Kirishima argues. Prove it then. Fuck. With how much he knew about Bakugou, he really should have known that he'd be part of his demise. From the first day he'd decided to approach the furious blonde and attempt to bridge between them some sort of friendship. He really should have known that he wouldn't be able to resist wanting more. He really should have known that their accidental touches, that seemed to linger for longer than necessary, and burn hotter than they should, would stop being enough long before they ever were. With how much he knew about Bakugou, he really should have known that he wouldn't have allowed Kirishima to get this close, if he didn't want him to be there either. You want me, Kirishima says, the confidence from this realization surging through him with impressive speed. Fucking obviously. Bakugou grinds his hips down and the friction causes Kirishima's breath to hitch and his thighs to tighten. It wasn't obvious to me, he breathes out. 'Cause you're an idiot, Bakugou grunts. And you're just as horrible at the whole feelings thing, Kirishima reminds him. You're fucking just as bad, Bakugou says. And there's a new bite to his words that's been missing from him since he stumbled into Kirishima's room. A little flash of his irritable, grouchy, sober self. Kirishima clings to it, not really realizing how much he's missed it. The fingers gripping in Bakugou's hair dig deeper into the soft locks, and the other arm slips away from his neck to touch baldly at his muscular chest, before moving to enclose around his slender waist. Not bad as you are, though. Kirishima eggs him on, trying to hide the little smile forcing its way onto his lips. Fucking yes you are, Bakugou argues, and he grinds down more forcefully as his mouth attacks Kirishima's throat again. He's more persistent now, teeth skimming along feverish skin, and pausing to bite and pull and suck at tender areas that make Kirishima's back sweat through his shirt. Kirishima beams at Bakugou's annoyance. It's familiar and rough, and everything he's come to know and appreciate and love about the blonde dork of a man lying on top of him. He presses his lips against Bakugou's forehead, barely containing his growing excitement and adoration. And what are we? Bakugou freezes. Kirishima tries to wrestle his grin back down into something more serious, but it's hard when he senses the noticeable panic setting into Bakugou's shoulders. Fuck, I don't... Bakugou hesitates, and he keeps his face buried in Kirishima's neck as he pants. We can just do whatever the fuck you want. We could be fucking... Kirishima can't hold back the laughter anymore, and he chuckles out little puffs of amusement as he traces the hard lines of Bakugou's back. You're a mess, dude. Bakugou relaxes against him, just for a moment, before he tenses up again and bites roughly into the tender skin he's been nibbling at. Kirishima sucks in a breath of surprise. Fucker, Bakugou murmurs against him. And when he lifts his head again to finally look at Kirishima's face, he's smirking. You've known me for almost 3 years, man, Kirishima berates him, his smile growing wider. When have I ever asked to have that kind of talk with you? Bakugou snorts. It's a stupid fucking talk. Kirishima raises an eyebrow at him. With you it seems like it would kind of be necessary. You know, 'cause you're so bad at feelings. Bakugou looks at him, his red eyes darting from the little scar over Kirishima's eyebrow, down to his lips, and then back up to catch gazes with him again. But you don't need it? Kirishima smirks now, feeling overly confident and a little giddy, and maybe his adrenaline is still pumping through his veins at top speeds. He tries to puff out his chest, an action that looks ridiculous with Bakugou's weight holding him down. Nah, I'm fluent in Baku speak. Bakugou blinks at him, a look of subtly masked confusion and overwhelming amusement blossoming on his face. Baku speak? Kirishima bites his bottom lip and nods curtly. He hums happily. What, for fuck's sake, is Baku speak? Bakugou asks, and he's almost having a hard time asking it seriously. Kirishima beams up at him, and he can't believe he's almost forgotten that Bakugou's hands are still gripping his waist, or that his arms are still holding onto him. It feels so easy, so natural, like the line he's been worried about crossing and destroying had never even existed in the first place. He can't believe they haven't been doing this, lying wrapped in each other's limbs, since the very beginning. It's our secret language, Kirishima says seriously. Our secret language? Bakugou says each word like it's the first time he's hearing it, and he's trying to piece it all together. Kirishima nods again. Mm-hmm. Bakugou looks down at him, his blonde eyebrows bunching together just a littlest bit, as he bites absently at his lip. He looks like he's thinking really hard about something, like he's making a decision. After a moment of silence, he nods too. It takes Bakugou a total of 2 seconds to make a truly reckless decision. Okay, and then he kisses him again. He kisses Kirishima until they both dissolve back into the trembling pile of needy gasps and urgent tugging. He kisses Kirishima until his stomach churns uncomfortably, and he has to rip himself away and run into the bathroom to puke again, Kirishima laughing hysterically behind him, before he hurries into the bathroom to rub sympathetically at his back. He kisses Kirishima after he's brushed his teeth again, and they've collapsed into the bed, snuggled under the camouflage blanket. He kisses Kirishima until they fall asleep at the ungodly hour of 4:30 a.m. on a school night. He kisses Kirishima the next morning, when his head is pounding and Kirishima is cursing the sound of his alarm. He kisses Kirishima in the privacy of their dorm rooms, in the hidden corners of the locker room, in the dark of the common room after everyone else has gone to bed. He kisses Kirishima in private, until one day, he kisses him in public, in front of the claw machine at their favorite arcade, and then again outside a restaurant that serves the best steaks, and then again in the back of the bus, hidden in the shadows of the night of the city, and then again in front of all of Kirishima's friends, who ooh and ah and what the fuck and about time them to death. He kisses Kirishima, and Kirishima decides that the unexpected disturbance of a drunk Bakugou pounding on his door in the middle of the night was well worth getting out of his cozy bed for.